Hey guys, it's Rez. Welcome back to a new session. In this session, we're going to talk about Firebase. And more than that, we're going to talk about how to write to it, how to read from it, how to read a bunch of children from it. All the basics just to get you started so you could do a decent small app that uses a consistent data, right? So in this case, for Firebase, we're just going to use the database. So yeah, at least it's a good start. So anyway, I'm going to start creating an app called Firebase, whatever you want. I'll just go and KitKat. It's pretty nice. And we're going to go empty project or empty activity. Finish. So in my case, I'm going to be using Android Studio. And we're going to use the assistant to help us create everything related to Firebase. I'm just going to ignore this. So, so using the assistant, it's going to help us do a lot of stuff, which would be just a pain in the butt for no reason, right? If you're using a different IDE, you will have to go look those up. They're not so bad. You just got to follow a few guides, or if you know your way around, you shouldn't have too much problem. In our case, I would say just go with Android Studio, and we're just going to use the assistant as best as we can. Okay. So, having a project open, you'll need a few things to understand. First, you need to log in, right? I'm just going to sign out to show you. So you'll see it on the top right where it says, do you want to log in here to Google for your Android Studio? You'll need to do this because you'll need to connect to the firebase.google.com, right? It's introduction, everything, and so forth, so on. And the feature we want to really focus here is to go to the console, right? At firebase.google.com, we're going to go to the console. It's the same link with just console.firebase.google.com. So everything is going to be live here, which is really neat because we'll see our data change as our program will run, okay? So first thing first, in our application, we don't need to do much. We just need to go on Tools and click on Firebase. This will pop up the assistant for us if we wait a bit. So this is the assistant, and you select what type of Firebase you want to do in this case. For us, we want real-time database. We want to store and sync data and always have a consistent information whenever we run our application. So having this selected, I'm going to save and retrieve data. It's going to come to this little part, still the assistant, right? And it has really nice step-by-step guide to get you started, which is really nice. So the first thing we need to do is make our app be able to connect to our Firebase. So press connect to Firebase. To do that, you'll need to enable Android Studio to have control over over your account. So you could have a kind of a connection to Firebase and also log you in inside Android Studio. So right now you should see, if you come back to your Android Studio. Wait, sorry. So I skipped a step. Let me just bring this back to that page. Where is my Android Studio? Actually, let's bring it here. Okay. Anyway, whatever. So in this case, so it's connecting to Firebase. It needs to know which project you want to connect to. Do you want to create a new one, or do you want to connect to one that you already have? So if you notice here, I have some that are 2 applications are connected to it. Right? So this is good because you could have the same database across multiple applications, multiple devices like Android, iOS, or 2 different applications that uses Android, etc. So in our case, we're just going to create a brand new, fresh off the boat. I'm going to call it Firebase Demo 2. I made another one in class for my students. So I'm going to call it Firebase 2. You guys call it whatever you want. Country, region, we're going to select Canada. Really, at this point, it doesn't matter. So, connect to Firebase. So, where's my Android Studio? I can't see it. Okay, good. So, as you connect to your Firebase, well, you'll notice a couple things. First, that you're logged in onto your Android Studio, and you can log out whenever. I'm just gonna get out of that. Second, you'll notice eventually when your project is created and you did the connection wise, that your assistant will tell you, hey, we did this part for your project. Your project right now is connected to that specific Firebase project that you created, right? You could even see the last status. Firebase project created and connected to locally to module app. Cool. Let's go to the second part. Add the real-time database to your app. So let's click that again. Now it's going to go modify your application to be able to run anything that's related to Firebase. So you could see here it's modifying your Gradle, right? So we're going to say accept changes, do it for me, I'm a lazy guy, or some whatever excuse that you could come up with. That's interesting that shows me so many. Anyway, there we go, back to normal. Okay, so I'm just gonna let Gradle rebuild everything, just make sure everything's fine, there's no errors. So we're just waiting here for the build to go. Well, while we're waiting, so you could see the OK on number 2. We go on number 3. Now it's telling you configure the Firebase database rules. So in this case, it's telling you how do you want me to connect to, well, what are the rules to connect to your database? Should it be public? Should it be only specific people connecting to it? Should the guy have to, log into Google or something, or with a specific username, password before he could retrieve, and so forth, so on. So there's 2 links in here that you could use, which are really nice. If I click on it, it will open it up. Just wait for it. Wait for it. Here, it starts telling you about all these rules. So you'll notice it's like an XML style rule or a JSON style rule, whichever one works for you, where it says inside rules, for the read, the authentication cannot be null. So here the user must be authenticated, right? And the write is doing the same thing, right? So this is the default rules, and it tells you, explains you every step. So I'm going to skip this. What we want to do is make it public, at least for now, because we just want to learn how to use the database. We don't really want to specify anything specific. If you want to, go check out the user and go check out the private and read a bit. It's pretty straightforward. It's nice. It's not too hard. So we're going to close this. We're going to go back to our Firebase console application. You should see all your recent projects here. However, we're not seeing ours. We're just going to refresh. We called it Firebase 2, right, for our project. So we go here, and you should see Firebase 2, or whatever you named it. So I'm going to click on that and connect to it. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here, and they're all pretty much real time. But what we want to do is go to the database. So this database is a live preview. Well, not preview, it's live. So all entries, all modification, you would see it live with a color-coded thing. You will see it in a bit. So green would be usually added new data, red for deleted some data, yellow for modified, etc., etc. So the first thing we need to do is go and change this rule set for our database before we forget. So we go in the rules, and we see that it says read and write must be authenticated. So we go simulator. We could do some random stuff. I'm just going to say this. Read that. Run. It says, hey, you're not authenticated, access denied, and tells you that, right? We're not authenticated. We do write. Same thing. Run. Nothing's working. Okay. So we go again here, and we're just going to change this to true. And this one to true. And we're going to publish. All right. All changes must be published. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Then we're going to run our simulator again. Hey, now it works. What about read? Hey, now it works. Okay. Even if we're authenticated, it should still work. Blah, blah, blah. User ID, etc. Run. Still working. Everything's good. All right, moving on. We'll come back to this probably another day. Data. So the way the data is stored on Firebase is a bit different than normal databases. In the case of Firebase, it uses really a JSON or a XML style where there's a root, how would you call this? A root element that contains every other element. In our case, it's called Fire2-2A4C4. Okay. Now, to add some data to it, we just need to do the plus, and we give it the name and value, right? So, rar meow. Now, inside our database, in the root database, or in the root folder, we have a name called rar, a variable called rar, that has the value rar. We could go and add another one. We could delete this, we could modify it, we could add another one. So we go add. So let's make something more meaningful. So name, my name is Rez, and we're gonna add that, right? Green is new, right? Then we have name, let's say phone. My value is 5 add. Now we have our phone and we have our name, and rar is kind of meaningless. We're just gonna delete it. So we're just gonna go here and press delete. So this is about to get deleted. Moving on. Okay, so notice that I can't really add much to this. So let's say if we were creating a text messaging app, we don't get much information other than the main user, that's one. But what if I want to add more users? So one thing we could do is press the plus and say, this time I'm going to add user 1, right? Or user 1. And then I don't put a value. The good part about not putting value, it means I could have children in there. So I do that. Oops, wait, sorry. I say user 01. Then on the right side, I say add. So you notice the value part goes away, but this new child is actually the value. So in this case, I have a name. My name is Rez. And then we go add another one. We have a phone. And we're adding that. So now I have a new subtree inside my main root, which is user 1. Notice I could still add stuff to it because the value is all the children. That's the value of user 01. And inside there is two values, one for name, one for phone. Now I could go and add another user 02, plus again, name equals Jess, let's say. Phone equals 51. All right. And again, I add, now I have two users. And now the root stuff is kind of meaningless, right? So it's not really good to use. Now, when data like this repeats, it kind of gets hard because inside our Android application, we'll need to retrieve each one of these. Remember what was the last digit. So we kind of need to figure out what was the last 2-3 digits they went. And if we go to 100 people, we need to figure out the last 3 digits and then move on from there and create a user 3, a user 4, etc. So these are not really great when you have infinite numbers. What you should do is class them in a way that you know the parent element and you don't really have to know the children's. Okay? So this is just a way to structure this to make your life easier. So we're going to delete these. Anything that should be like a one value only and you're never going to repeat it, this is when you want to do something like this, right? We'll make a good example in a second. Let's just clear out all of this. Actually, I'm going to keep these two users. So this time what we're going to do is inside my main root, I'm going to create something called users. All right. And inside there, we're going to have a random name that's going to be generated for us. It's going to be a unique value. And inside those, we're going to have a name, Rez. Okay. And also, I forgot to put phone, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, the cool part is what you need to know about is this users. When you add new data to it, all you would need to do is, again, it will generate from code a random ID that's not being used. And inside that random ID, we always going to have two children that we know of. One, its name, the value is whatever. And the other one, I forgot to do it again, is phone, the value is whatever. Okay? So what we do know of is the user, which is the root of all my children, of all my user 1, user 2, user 3. And every one of those users, they're going to have a unique ID that we do not care about. But inside that unique ID, we would always have name and phone. Okay? See, name and phone. So these are the stuff we really care about. We don't care about this. We don't really care about how we're storing it. Okay, so this is really nice. So I'm going to delete these two. Now, we're going to recreate everything inside Android in a second, okay? I just want to mention that this has infinite users, but sometimes data you want to store and keep it permanent. But it's like a one-time value, or it's like a trigger, or it's like a light switch. It's either on or off. There's not multiple of it. There's only one. These are the moments where you want to put a specific name and a value that goes with that name, right? And I don't know. So let's say switch. So let's say if we were testing our application, or man, it's not really any good thing. Or let's say where the servers are located. The server is going to be located in Montreal, right? This, I only have one server, so there's always going to be one value. And all these users are going to be from the server Montreal for some odd reason. Okay, these are the moment you want to have a specific name and a specific, whatever value that goes with that specific name. Like, again, comparatively, in the user case, we could have millions of users. We don't really care about how we ID them, but we care about the name and the phone, right? Well, whatever data you store from the users. Okay, so let's go and recreate all of this. We're going to start with the server part. So I'm going to delete all of this. And we're going to get back to our Android. Now, going back to Android. We finished number 3 where we put the rules. Number 4. Super cool, super easy. I love this assistant. Basically, it tells you, hey, how can I store a value to my database? So we're just going to copy this. And for now, we're going to put it on the onCreate. I'm going to move this later on when we learn how to use everything from it, okay? So this is going to be like a quick setup, which is really nice. So we come in, there's a bunch of stuff missing. We need to import them. So press the key. It's either Alt Enter for you or whatever it is. I don't know. Depends on what you use. We need to import the Firebase database, which is neat. We'll come back to it. Well, this is the instance of your database, which is like, again, straightforward. So nothing to say much, really. I don't want to talk for uselessness. But if you go look at all the properties and functionalities it has, kind of gives you a sense of why you need this later on in the future. Like if you want to have your application be able to be usable during offline mode or online mode or etc. So going back here. From your database connection, you want to get reference to something. So this database currently is set at your root. When you do a reference, this means, hey, I'm going to create a new name. And I want to give it a value here to that name. So we have a variable here, my ref. Set your value to hello world. So it's basically saying, I want a new name called message. And I want to set the value to hello world. All right. So all we're going to do is say, you know what? We're just going to run this. I'm just going to run it on my Nexus thing. And as you notice, I'm just leaving it on this page for a second. I want you to see the real-time changes as it happens. So the moment my application is built and ran, which is about to do it, you'll see the updated version inside my database. Okay, welcome back, guys. I cut off the previous part because I'm guessing because I was running out of space, it killed off some of the cache by Android emulator required. Right. So I'm just gonna restart this part. I'm gonna delete this text they added. All right, and we're gonna see it run live. All right, so we're gonna stop and run it again because this is on the on crate, right? It only runs once. So if we do the quick run, it will just not run. So going back to here, I'm just gonna wait it out, and the live database will show you the new value added. Notice the name is message, the value is hello world. So if we go back here, we have the get reference to message and the value to set to hello world, right? This variable is setting the value to. So if we remember our switch, we called our switch the server, and we set the value to Montreal, right? So if we do this again, we'll see a new value. Use the same selection for future. It's getting annoying. So message, we didn't delete it this time because we're adding a new one. Obviously, if we change the value, it will rewrite message, right? So this got added, server Montreal. Let's say today the server moved and it went to Chicago. Again, we're gonna run it, and we'll see that modification will happen. And this time I just want to show you that the color is going to be different. It's going to be yellowish rather than the green. So yeah, so modification happened. Okay, now the next part is, let's say we want to have multiple children and we want to go through it. Well, actually, before we do that, we could add a few values. No, but it's fine. So let's say this time I don't want to change server. I want to have my users, right? So I'm going to call this users, whatever you want. Sorry, my disk is about to get full. So this time, rather than setting a value, remember, if you set a value, you lose the opportunity to have any children in there, right? So we don't want to set any values for our users. We want to add children. So we're going to take this off, dot child. So in this case, we're going to create a new child, call it I don't know, user 1, and we're going to say dot set value to res, or yeah, or actually again, before that we had another one which was dot child. By the way, remember that these all return database reference, the same thing we did for my first reference, right? So this was like the root, well, not the root, but it's like the first value we put at root, right? Inside that root, I put a child called user1, and inside that, I'm gonna add a child called name dot set value to res. And I could just copy this, put it again, and this time rather than name, we could put phone, and we could put here 354 whatever, right? And then again, I could copy this. Well, you guys could run it once to see how it is. Put user 2, name, Jess, number, something else, right? So I'm gonna just run this. And we'll just go here and wait for the changes to happen. So if we did it correctly, we should see a user plus inside that a child called user1, and inside that some values. So if we open this up, we got our users, user1 and user2. We got name res, phone, user2, Jess, whatever. But we have an issue here. Sorry about that. Here the problem is, the next time we kind of retrieve or we're writing, we need to remember what user we were at. So we could always create a variable that says, hey, int the number, and it starts at 1, and we do like a string concatenation plus number. And then again here. And then we say, well, now that I added one user, I'm going to go and increment my user amount. And now I do the same thing here. Right? Now this is great. It works and whatnot, and when I retrieve the data, I just need to kind of figure out inside the string what part of it is the number and what number it is at. The moment I find that out, I could continue my numbering. However, the problem with this is not really clean. It's kind of ugly. The problem is we don't really need to know user numbers and all of this. That's like meaningless data forced onto us for some odd reason. The better way of doing it, it's this thing called put or something. So let's see here. Rather than child 1, we're going to do dot push. This is what we want. Push will push that data into a random name that's going to be always unique. Okay? So the thing with this is, let's try to recreate it first, actually. Okay? We're going to see it's going to be interesting here. And here too, we're going to change it all to push, right? So I'm just going to delete my number. And here we don't need this part, right? We change that to push. This user part, we change it to push, okay? You guys are going to see something interesting. At the same time, I'm going to fail at it a bit, but you're going to understand why in a second. So I'm going to run this. Just notice it's root push child name, root push child phone, root push child name, root push, okay? So we're going to run this. And I'm going to delete this user while my app is about to run, because I don't want that yet. These ones we could leave it alone. So my app is running. Again, the root should always be users. It's not going to change. Oh, now we got 4 users, which is weird, because we only wanted each of them to have name and user. Look, hey, name, phone. Now, first thing you should notice is this is going to be always a unique value, which is really nice. However, this and this should have been combined together. What's going on? Well, if we look, we do one push here, which is, hey, go create me a new value and give me that. But we don't save the reference to it. We don't save the reference to that object it created. And then here again, we do the same thing. So we actually created 2 specific users, added a child name and phone to them. Right? So this is bad. So what we need to do is kind of save these, save what this returns to us, right? So if you remember, if we do dot push, it returns us a database reference. We need to store that. So we're going to do database reference, let's say child, or let's say user1, u1, okay, user1 equals root dot push. More than that, I don't need to know. Database, oops, went too far. Database reference user2 equals root dot push. Now, obviously, the root is going to be users, right? Not root. It's just the root users. Let's call this root users. It's a better name. Always change your names until you figure out the best name you can find. Now, inside users, I created 2 users. And inside that, I could remove this part and say, hey, user1 has a child named and the value to res. And user1 has a child called phone and a value 34 whatever. Okay, let's see if I could do this. User2. If you want to do what I just did, hold Alt and drag all of it. That's the cool part about IntelliJ. No, anyway, another topic. So now I have a reference to those 2 new child, and I'm going to add them. So the object we create is only be once, twice, not more. So going back here, I'm going to just delete this so we get a fresh copy. Otherwise, it's going to add 2 more to my users, which we don't want. And we're going to see our database change. Now we got 2 users with 2 different values, right? Super cool. Okay, so moving on from this, we're going to just leave that be. we're going to go into step number 5 and from our assistant. Read from your database. In this case, we're going to create another reference to whatever you want to read, and there's going to be 2 functions that we're going to overwrite. One is going to be called onDataChange and one on cancel. For now, we're just going to concentrate on the data change. This is really nice that the assistant tells you everything, right? You guys should really read these comments. They're really neat. I actually learned the whole Firebase thing by this assistant, which was really neat. They did a really well job, really good job on this. Anyway, so for now, I'm just going to stop creating stuff, and we're just going to comment all of this out. Can I comment from here? If my thing lets me. I don't know the shortcut keys, so pretty sure there's somewhere here. Code, maybe surround with, unwrap, completion, folding. Comment with line comments. Let's do block comments. Alright, so we're gonna take this part out for now. We're just gonna leave it there. Now, let's do the part where we're gonna read. I'm just gonna again copy and paste. Why not? It's really well done, and we're gonna modify it from there. So, read from database. My ref doesn't exist anymore. It's called root users right now. So let's just do that. Well, you know what? Actually, let's not touch users yet. Let's start with the server, right? So I'm going to create. Sorry, there we go. So database reference. We're going to call it our server. Ref equals database dot get reference to. I want you to get me reference to our. Don't forget lowercase, uppercase. They all are different. So we're gonna write server. So we have our server reference. We're gonna say server ref. Add value listener to value event listener. This object doesn't seem to exist, so we're gonna go import the class. Data snapshot type of object cannot be resolved. Again, we need to import the class. Why am I getting random? Import the class. And the log, we're not going to use it. We're going to use a toast just to get live value as we run it. Because this time we just want to see those values given to us. So, so this is adding an event listener. Event listeners happen when the trigger happens, when the requirement is met. It's going to trigger those functionalities, right? So, hey guys, sorry I ran out of space on my disk. Just continuing on. So again, we're missing this database thing. We're going to add that to import the class. Okay, we have no more error. So if we read on the data change, you'll notice saying a comment from the assistant. This method is called once when the initial value and again whenever data on this location is updated. So the first time that you add this event value listener, it's going to go through whatever data it's already there, do this once, and then the next, well, it's going to call for each of those elements, by the way. If there's multiple children, it'll call it for each child. Multiple values. Anyway, we'll come back to this. It'll call it once for that specific value, and then call it again for each time the data changes. So in this case, we're pointing to our server. So the first time it runs, it will read the data if there is any. If there isn't, they won't do anything. We're going to get back this string. So data snapshot, get the value. What the value we're expecting is a string, right? And we're just going to create a toast and say the value that we just got. In this case, so when we run this, we should see our value Chicago pop up in a toast, right? Because there's already a value. Sorry. And you know what? We could go change the value right after it to see the value pop up a new one again. It's up to you. Like I said, it will run every time that the value changes. So I'm just waiting for the app to be launched. It's launching my activity. So hello world, and we get the value Chicago, which is from this, right? If we put it later on, we could modify it and we get that. So this is nice. From here, I could probably connect it to some sort of, I don't know, some sort of element on my activity. Oh wow, I only have 5% data. Let's see. So before we move on, I want to do one last thing. I want to go through this list of users, right? So we're going to modify this add value event listener to be able to get each element of users in there. So first thing we need to do, the same way we did connection to our server, we made a reference to our server. We're going to do a reference to our capital users, which we already have, right? So I'm going to change it over here, and I'm going to say for my root users, add a value listener, event value listener. And on the data change, so this data snapshot is going to give me back users. But users itself, it has one value, which is the whole thing. It's all the children. That's the value. What we want to do is go through each one of those children and do something. So here, I'm going to create a for each, right? I actually don't like the way it syntaxes it, so I'm just going to delete this. And we're going to write it ourselves. So for, again, we're going to retrieve back a data snapshot every time. Okay, so data snapshot. So let's say this is the child. And each element of what? Well, our data snapshot dot get our children. So you'll notice the get children will give you, again, data snapshots every time. So we're going to go through every children we have. And let's just do a toast. So for each of my children, so this time I'm going to remove this and I'm going to put child, right? Because otherwise it was our root. Get the value and toast that value. Oh, actually, sorry. So we get our child, we're going to get this. If we toast that value, the value is going to be weird. Now we need to get the name and the phone, right? So we got our child. I'm going to do string name equals child dot we're going to get its child called name dot get value, and you got to specify what the type of value is. It's a string class. So notice here, this child gives me back this thing, this weird unique ID. Inside that, I ask for the specific child called name. So I get back this, and I say give me back the value inside of it, which is a string. So the name is stored there. And then I do the same thing. String phone equals child dot child. Give me the phone. Again, if you make a syntax error, this could hurt you. Get value string dot class. Right? And we could remove this value part, and we could say name. I'm going to just do a string concatenation plus phone. All right, and let's run this. We should see two data for the name and the phone for each of my users, right? So the first one should be res, like if we look at it here quickly, res 34 whatever, and the next one is Jess 42362. So we're gonna just run this. So by the way, a little hint here, you should make a constant value for these specific references I'm doing nonstop. because at some point you might misspell something and it's going to ruin your whole app, and you're going to be looking everywhere. Why is it doing that? Why is it doing that? Especially since here the data is on somewhere else, right? You don't get live feedback. Anyway, so we got res and number, and then we got Jess and number. Okay, so guys, this kind of gives you an idea of how retrieving multiple children, also how to retrieve a specific value, what to do when the data changes, right? If I change the data here, so right after, sorry, this would get hit every time. So every time there's a new user, this would run again. So maybe you want to check if I already have that children, you don't want to run it, right? Or you want to just run when you get new children. I would really recommend that you guys go through all the attributes that these things have. So like my data snapshot, if we press dot, look at all the functionalities and attributes it has. These are really nice. So does it even have a children? Does it have a child called name or whatever? If it doesn't, don't try to retrieve something non-existent, right? See how many children they has. I don't know if this exists or whatever. And again, if you want to know what they do, just go through it, or go inside Google and figure out where the helps are. Sorry, I'm a bit sick here with the flu. In the next video, I'll try to make it as soon as I get more power than my 3%. And the next video, we'll make a small little app quickly with buttons and stuff where we could read these values, write these values, and etc. But I think I'm going to do it tomorrow. So please like, subscribe. This was Rez. See you guys next time. If you have comments or questions, just put in the comments or message me directly. Either way, I'll help you guys out. All right, cheers.